everyone, it's me, Kylie. Today we're going to be talking about what I read in June of 2020. First off, I need another cup of coffee, so I'll be right back. Coffee. Look at that steam, it's beautiful. Okay, I didn't read a whole ton in June, so here are 3 out of 4 of what I read. I am going to start with the first book that I read. That is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is my second time reading this book. The first time it was something like 4.5 stars. It didn't hit me as big as it did this time. I did cry both times. I cried more this year when I read this. But me, Brianna, and Crystal, we read this for the Literary Alliance group on Goodreads. There will be more information down below in the description if you're interested in joining that book club. But I bought the physical copy because I really wanted to annotate it this time, and you know, as you can see, I did not annotate it. This book follows Evelyn Hugo, who is kind of like a Hollywood starlet type person, like a Marilyn Monroe-esque celebrity from the like 50s, 60s, and it follows her through each decade essentially, and it's called The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo because it's always a mystery on which one was her true love. It really just talks about her life, how she became famous and got into the starlight, and it follows her through all of her hardships and what she's done in order to achieve the kind of fame that she has. Friendship and love and all sorts of trials. This book, I'm just gonna come out and say it because I think everybody and their moms has read this book at this point. So this book is almost a staple for LGBT literature, but this book really like solidified my sexuality for me, even though I've known it well before I've ever read this, even the first time around. And I think this year is the first year that I've really been able to just fully embrace that part of me. So I think this book actually hit harder this year for that reason other than the last one. But this book is really heartbreaking, and also it made me smile in some places. And Evelyn, don't get me wrong, ooh, I almost spilled my coffee. Don't get me wrong, she is definitely the type of character who is morally gray. She does some questionable things, some things that, you know, anybody would agree is not something you would do to a friend or family member or anything like that. I think throughout this story, she starts off as this young woman who is just very much determined to make it as a celebrity, and she grows and grows throughout everything that she faces throughout the years. And by the end of the story, she really appreciates more of a humble living life. She kind of grows, and I think that was very interesting to read, just to watch the evolution of somebody who is kind of like just a slimy, greedy, selfish celebrity who morphs into this older person who regrets a lot of the things and choices that they've made and just wants to settle down and live an honest, good life with her family. Everyone and their mother has read this book, and if you haven't read it yet, I recommend that you do, especially if you like anything LGBT. The next thing that I read is actually the one book I don't have the physical copy of. I'll place a picture here, and that is Slay. I don't remember who wrote it. Who wrote Slay? I picked this up on a recommendation from Brianna. If you can't tell right now, we're like besties. Brittany Morris. So Slay by Brittany Morris, and this is kind of about a girl who she created a game, like an MMO type game, where it kind of became something for Black individuals to have this safe space for and connect and really just embrace their culture. She's essentially keeping it a secret, so her family doesn't really know, her boyfriend doesn't know, her friend doesn't know that she is the creator of this game called Slay. One day somebody enters the game because while it is kind of like a central point for people of color, of Black individuals, it is still open to like anybody to really kind of like play the game. So somebody comes in and they start spouting off like white supremacist bullshit. It becomes kind of like this duel between Kira, the main character, the creator of the game, and this white supremacist jerk. Kind of where it's leading up to. It's a kind of a battle, like a, not a battle, but like it's like a metaphor for equal rights and allowing people to still embrace their culture and ways of life versus white supremacy. I hope I did that justice. I would recommend looking up reviews on from Black booktubers about this book. When I was looking it up, I was considering doing a community review of this, and I found a ton of wonderful Black creators who talked about this book. So definitely give it a Google, and I will try to remember to include links as well in the description. But there was also a lot of underlying conversation about hair, natural Black hair, certain words that are used, slang, like the list goes on and on. It's really a great book. It might be a little hard for people to wrap their head around if they don't necessarily understand gaming culture, just because that is such a focal point of the book, but it is really a great book. The next book I read, this one, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Okay, so this is the book I was going to do community review on. I had this planned since like May, and I wanted to do a community review on this because it was a debut, and June is Pride Month. So I read it and I liked it, but my biggest fault with it is that there just isn't much to say. I feel like this book was very spelled out to you in a way, like there wasn't much room to interpret your own thoughts and opinions and stuff. And while my opinions already kind of aligned with what is in this book, I still like to think in my books. I enjoyed the story. I really love the romance. I think Alex and Henry are adorable, but I felt like it was just spelled out for me. I don't know. I don't like it when things are spelled out for me. So I think I rated it a 4.5 stars on Goodreads, but I think I'm going to bump it down to a 4, just because when I read it, my initial reaction was I really like this book, but now when I went to sit down this past weekend, I had a 3-day weekend, and it was like I had the time to sit down. I filmed down every single day, all 3 days, and each time I went to go film a community review, I just didn't have anything to say. So I am skipping the community review on this, and I'll make episode 2 the next book I feel like I have something to say about. I do still recommend this. I think this is great, but I do think though that, how do I put this nicely? If your opinions differ like at all against what is in this book, you may not enjoy it as much. And I will give a warning to those who struggle with having things spelled out for you. Not that anything in here is necessarily like something I disagree with. I was frustrated with the fact that I was pretty much told what the right and wrong thing was instead of the writing to allow me to make the decision for myself what was right and wrong. It's hard to explain, but I still do recommend it. I still think this is great. I appreciated that it was not as heavy on the politics as it appears it could be. It was very much the romance heavy story that I appreciated, and the politics was just kind of like the delivery format of the relationship. 4 solid stars for me. And then I finished off the month with Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. And this one is teeny tiny, and let me tell you, I think I gave this one like a 2.5 stars. I had such high expectations for this, because when you tell me that something is about horseback riding queer individuals posing as librarians to fight the government, essentially, it intrigued me a lot. And I really found myself only interested in the action bits, believe it or not. And it's kind of the same situation. Whoa. It's kind of the same situation as Red, White, and Royal Blue. I felt like this one was spelling things out for me, and I didn't like that. It wasn't very subtle. And I understand this one's hard for me because it is so tiny. It's a novella. It's really hard to create subtlety in a book this tiny, but it still really bothered me. And every time I read a novella, I get that same feeling. So this is definitely not partial to this book. I don't know, but the reason it is low, I tend to be more generous with my ratings on novellas because they're so small, and I know I'm just not gonna get the kind of high that I want out of it. So I try to be more generous. So the reason why it's like a 2.5 to 3 stars is just because I wasn't interested in the plot like I wanted to be. I was only interested when the stakes were high, when people were chasing after the horseback riding librarians, you know? And then when it all settled down, I just didn't really care. I didn't care. It felt like boring yammering. So it wasn't for me. I think if you are a type of person who can deal with novellas and that issue of not getting as much out of it doesn't bother you, this one might be something worth picking up. Again, also if you like LGBT and you just want to swim in all the gay. I wish there was more out of it. And I was reading the sleeve, and Sarah Gailey is actually, Sarah Gailey goes by they, them pronouns. I did not know that. I'm glad I read that before I made any video. But it says that they are, so their young adult debut novel got published in spring this year. So it seems like they were writing a whole bunch of novellas. That seemed to be their thing, and that they started publishing full-length novels this year. So now that I know that, that might be something I will look into, because I did overall enjoy the writing style, and I really think it was just a fault of a novella, kind of the nature of the beast. So I'd like to try one of their novels and see how that goes, and I think that'll give me more of an impression on if I'm going to like their writing or not. I only got 4 books read this month, and while I had so much planned, I started off strong in my June TBR with something like 6 books. I didn't get to them all, and then I think by mid-month I had racked up about 20 books I wanted to read, and that just wasn't gonna happen. Like, let's be real. And the reason why was because I had a fun little manic episode. It wasn't anything intense, but it did cause me to think that I could read so many books that I just can't do that. I checked out like a whole bunch of books from the library. If you haven't seen my TBR for July yet, I recommend looking at that. I will leave a card and just link in the description. Go watch that next. But that, I talk about my library TBR. So I've got all these books that I racked up from June that I want to read, and I'm gonna start with the library ones because those have a return date. Thank you so much for watching to the end if you've made it this far, and if you like the video, go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell. That way you're notified whenever I upload, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.